Washington, D.C. is known today as the capital of freedom and democracy, a global symbol of liberty and justice. But hidden beneath its monuments and marble halls lies a much darker foundation. The story of slavery in early D.C. is one that has long been overlooked. This is the untold chapter of how a city built on the ideals of freedom was shaped by the labor and suffering of enslaved people. When construction began on the new federal capital in the 1790s, President George Washington personally selected the site along the Potomac River. As plans for the city's grand buildings took shape, so too did the dependence on enslaved labor. Enslaved men were leased or owned outright by government officials, private contractors, and even by those overseeing the city's development. They cleared dense forests, drained swamps, and quarried the stone used to build the U.S. Capitol, the White House, and other federal buildings. Despite their critical contributions, their names were rarely recorded and their stories seldom told. Slave markets and auctions were a visible part of daily life in early Washington. By the early 1800s, D.C. was home to one of the largest slave markets in the country. Men, women, and children were bought and sold in public spaces, often within sight of the very buildings that represented American ideals. One of the most notorious slave dealers, William H. Williams, ran the infamous Yellow House, or Williams' Slave Pen, just a short distance from the Capitol. Enslaved people were held in overcrowded conditions, waiting to be shipped to the Deep South. These holding pens were not hidden. They were part of the urban landscape, a silent but undeniable reminder of the city's contradictions. Life for enslaved people in D.C. was marked by constant hardship and fear. Families could be separated at any moment, with no legal recourse. Many were forced to work as domestic servants, laborers, blacksmiths, or cooks, while others were rented out to various employers around the city. But even within the constraints of bondage, enslaved people created strong, resilient communities. They formed networks of support, practiced their faith, and passed down cultural traditions. Their endurance was an act of resistance in itself. In addition to community building, acts of resistance took many forms. Some enslaved people escaped with the help of free black residents or white abolitionists who risked their lives to help them. The Underground Railroad ran quietly through the city, with safe houses hidden among its alleys and homes. D.C. was also a center for anti-slavery activism. Abolitionist newspapers, church leaders, and civic groups pushed back against the institution of slavery, despite intense political and social opposition. The struggle for freedom in Washington reached a turning point during the Civil War. On April 16, 1862, almost 9 months before the Emancipation Proclamation, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Compensated Emancipation Act. This law ended slavery in Washington, D.C., making it the first jurisdiction in the United States to do so through federal action. The act freed over 3,000 enslaved individuals and offered compensation to loyal slave owners, a controversial clause that highlighted the slow and painful path toward justice. Although imperfect, the law marked a pivotal moment and was celebrated by newly freed communities with parades and public gatherings. But the story didn't end there. Even after emancipation, black residents in Washington faced deep systemic barriers: racism, segregation, economic inequality, and limited political power. Formerly enslaved individuals struggled to find housing, education, and fair employment. Freedmen's villages emerged in areas such as Barry Farm, where newly emancipated families tried to build new lives despite the odds. Institutions like Howard University were established to educate and empower the next generation, but the scars of slavery remain. Today, the legacy of slavery in Washington, D.C. is still etched into the city's fabric. Landmarks like the Capitol and the White House stand as testaments not only to American ideals, but also to the forced labor that made them possible. Streets, neighborhoods, and even schools bear the names of historical figures who upheld or profited from slavery. However, there is a growing effort to confront this past openly. Museums, memorials, and public programs are beginning to tell the fuller, more honest story of D.C.'s early history. Understanding this history is not about rewriting the past. It's about seeing it in full. The story of slavery in early Washington, D.C. is a painful but essential part of the city's identity. It challenges us to ask difficult questions about the meaning of freedom and justice, and how we remember those who were denied both. So, what can we learn from this hidden chapter of history? How do we honor the lives and legacies of those who helped build the nation's capital under bondage? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories about the city that shaped a nation.